NEC 2023, Chapter 1 Mastery. Podcast Episode 1, Article 90, Purpose, Scope, and Open quote. Source, NFPA 70, National Electrical Code, 2023 edition. Article 90T, the frame. Welcome to Episode 1 of our NEC Chapter 1 Mastery series. Today we're covering Article 90, which explains what the NEC is, what it applies to, what it does not apply to, and how it is enforced. Close quote. Even though you said we're skipping the introduction, Article 90 is not fluff. It tells you how every other rule in the NEC works. Miss this, and later chapters feel arbitrary. Think of Article 90 as the operating system of the NEC. 90.1, Purpose of the NEC. Key idea. The NEC is about safety, not efficiency, not cost, not convenience. The code's purpose is the practical safeguarding of persons and property from hazards arising from the use of electricity. What this mean, the NEC does not guarantee a good design, uninterrupted service, optimal performance. It does guarantee minimum safety standards. Memory hook. Open quote, NEC equals minimum safety, not best practice. Close quote. If you see a test answer that says to ensure efficient electrical systems, that is wrong. Hattery 90.2, Scope of the NEC. This section answers, where does the NEC apply? The NEC applies to premises wiring, conductors and equipment, installations inside or outside buildings, power, lighting, signaling, and communication circuits. In short, if it's part of a premises wiring system, the NEC probably applies. What the NEC does not apply, NEC does not cover utility-owned installations under exclusive control of utilities, installations in ships, aircraft, railways with limited exceptions, communications utility equipment under exclusive control. Memory hook, open quote, utility-owned and utility-controlled equals generally outside NEC. Close quote. This distinction shows up constantly in exam questions. 90.3, Code arrangement. This explains how the NEC is organized and which rules override others. The Golden Rule. Chapters 1 to 4, general rules, apply everywhere. Chapters 5 to 7, special rules, override 1 to 4 when applicable. Chapter 8, communications, largely independent. Chapter 9, tables, mandatory unless noted otherwise. If a special rule conflicts with a general rule, the special rule wins. Memory hook, open quote, special beats general, close quote. Spash authority having jurisdiction. This is where the AHJ comes in. Key points. The NEC itself is not law. It becomes law only when adopted by a jurisdiction. The authority having jurisdiction, AHJ, interprets the code, approves equipment, grants special permission, enforces compliance. Important exam insight. If a question asks who has final say, the answer is almost always the AHJ. Nash 90.5, mandatory versus permissive language. This section tells you how T erectly. Mandatory, shall not. These are requirements. Tash, permissive. Shall be permitted. Permitted. These are allowed options, not requirements. Informational notes, formerly called fine print notes, not enforceable, used for explanation only. Memory hook, open quote, shall equals must, shall be permitted equals optional, close quote. This wording difference is one of the most common test traps. Article 90, why it matters. Article 90 teaches you how to interpret every rule, when exceptions override general rules, who enforces the code, how to read NEC language correctly. Without Article 90, the NEC is just a list of random restrictions. Episode 1, Lock-in Summary. Say this out loud. NEC exists for minimum electrical safety. It applies to premises wiring. Utilities are mostly exempt. Special rules override general rules. The AHJ has final authority. Shall means mandatory. If you can recite that, you understand Article 90. Next episode, Podcast Episode 2, Article 100, Core Definitions, Part 1, Framework Terms. When you're ready, just say, open quote, start Podcast Episode 2, close quote. NEC 2023, Chapter 1 Mastery. Podcast Episode 2, Article 100, Core Definitions, Framework Terms. Open quote, source, NFPA 70, National Electrical Code, 2023 edition. Article 100. Why this episode matters. Welcome to Episode 2. Today we start Article 100, Definitions, which is one of the most important and most underestimated parts of the NEC. Close quote. Article 100 doesn't tell you what to do. It tells you what words mean, and in the NEC, words decide compliance. If you misunderstand a definition, you will misunderstand every rule that uses it. Think of Article 100 as the dictionary the exam expects you to memorize. How to study definitions. Before we begin, one rule. Open quote, never substitute everyday meanings for NEC meanings. Close quote. The NEC definition overrides common language every time. Ad hoc definitive authority having jurisdiction, AHJ. The organization, office, or individual responsible for enforcing the NEC. Key idea. The AHJ interprets, the AHJ approves, the AHJ has final say. Memory hook. Open quote, if there's a dispute, the AHJ wins. Close quote. Approved means acceptable to the AHJ. Important distinction. Approved does not automatically mean listed. It means the AHJ accepts it. Exam trap. If the question asks, who approves? AHJ accessible as applied to ELU's approach, not guarded by locks or obstacles. This does not mean easily reachable, readily accessible. Those are different definitions. Accessible readily can be reached quickly, without tools, without moving obstacles, and without climbing. Memory hook, open quote, readily equals no tools, no ladders, no excuses. Close quote. Definition group 2. Acceptance and identification. Identified, recognizable as suitable for a specific purpose. Usually done by labeling, marking, listing, manufacturer's instructions. Identified, approved. Approved comes from the AHJ. Listed equipment included on a list published acceptable to the AHJ. Examples, UL, ETL, CSA, if accepted. Exam insight. Listed equipment must be installed per its listing. Labeled equipment with a label, symbol, or mark from an acceptable organization. Listed equals on a list. Labeled, physically marked. They often appear together, but they are not the same word. Definition group 3. Electrical system framework. Premises. Wiring and exterior wiring after the service point includes power, lighting, control, signaling circuits. Critical rule, open quote, NEC applies after the service point, close quote. CHAS service, the conductors and equipment delivering electric energy from the utility to the premises wiring system. Service, core feeder, group branch circuit. Those distinctions matter later. Equipment, a general term for fittings, devices, appliances, luminaires, machinery. Memory hook, open quote. If it uses electricity and isn't a conductor, it's probably equipment, close quote. Definition group 4, safety and condition terms. Grounded, connected to ground or a conductive body that serves in place of ground. This does not mean safe, protected. Grounded is a condition, not a guarantee. Grounding, the act of establishing a connection to ground. Key contrast, grounded NG action. Live parts, conductors or equipment energized in normal operation. Exam reminder, live does not mean exposed, it means capable of carrying current. Why these definitions dominate exams. Most NACA exam questions fail students because one word is misunderstood, two similar terms are swapped, a common language meaning is assumed. Article 100 removes ambiguity if you memorize it. Episode 2, Lock-in Summary. Say this aloud. NEC definitions override common meanings. AHJ approves everything. Approved, listed. Readily accessible means no tools or obstacles. NEC applies after the service point. Grounded is a condition, grounding is an action. If that feels automatic, you're on track. That next episode, podcast episode 3, Article 100, Electrical System and Conductor Definitions. When you're ready, say open quote, NEC start podcast episode 3, Chapter 1 Mastery. Podcast episode 3, Article 100, Electrical System and Conductor Definitions. Open quote. Source, NFPA 70, National Electrical Code 2020-23 edition. Why? This episode is critical. Welcome to episode 3. Today we're covering the electrical system and conductor definitions in Article 100, the terms that explain how power actually moves through a building. Close quote. These are some of the most tested and most confused definitions in the NEC. If you mix these up, Articles 210, 215, 220, and 230 become a nightmare. Think of this episode as learning the electrical family tree. Study rule for this episode. Every definition today answers one core question. Open quote. Where is this conductor in relation to the source? Close quote. Definition group 1. Circuit types. Branch circuit. The circuit conductors between the final overcurrent device and the outlets. Key details, always downstream of the OCPD. Supplies outlets, lighting, or utilization equipment. Memory hook. Open quote. Branch circuits serve the load. Close quote. Feeder. All circuit conductors between service equipment or another power source and the final branch circuit overcurrent device. Important contrast, feeders do not serve outlets directly. They supply panel boards or distribution equipment. Memory hook. Open quote. Feeders feed panels. Close quote. Sahashar service. The conductors and equipment delivering electric energy from the utility to the premises wiring system. Includes service drop or lateral, service entrance conductors, service equipment. Exam trap. Service conductors are not feeders. Tash definiteroles. Conductor A wire or other form of metal suitable for carrying current. Simple but foundational. Grounded conductor. A system or circuit conductor that is intentionally grounded. Important, usually the neutral, identified by white or gray. Memory hook. Open quote, grounded conductor equals roll, usually. Close quote. Equipment grounding conductor, EGC, the conductive path that connects non-current carrying metal parts to the grounding electrode system. Purpose, fault clearing, safety. Critical distinction. Open quote, EGCs do not normally carry current. Close quote. Ungrounded conductor, a C only grounded, usually black, red, blue. Memory hook. Open quote, hot conductors are ungrounded. Close quote. Definition group 3. System structure. Separately derived system. An electrical source whose grounded conductor is not solidly connected to another system's grounded conductor. Examples, transformers, generators when configured that way. Exam gold. Open quote. A neutral bond usually exists at the source of a separately derived system. Close quote. Service point. The point of connection between and premises wiring. Critical rule, NEC jurisdiction starts here. Memory hook. Open quote. Before service point equals utility rules. After equals NEC. Close quote. Definition group 4. Load and rating terms. Load. The amount of power drawn by equipment or circuits. Can be calculated, continuous, non-continuous. You'll use this definition constantly in Chapter 2. Continuous load, a load expected to run 3 hours or more. Exam staple, open quote. Continuous loads are treated differently for conductor sizing, close quote. Non-continuous load, a load not expected to run 3 hours or more. Y for contrast. Definition, group 5, outlets and connections. Outlet, a point on the wiring system where current is taken to supply utilization equipment. Important, lighting outlet, receptacle outlet, appliance outlet. Exam trap, open quote. A junction box is not an outlet unless current is supplied there, close quote. Tash receptacle, a contact device installed at an outlet for the connection of an attachment plug. Receptacle, outlet. The outlet is the location, the receptacle is the device. Why these definitions control everything. These definitions determine conductor sizing, grounding methods, bonding locations. If you know where a conductor sits in the system, the code makes sense. Episode 3, lock-in summary. Say this out loud. Branch circuits serve loads. Feeders serve panels. Services bring power from the utility. Neutrals are grounded conductors. EGCs clear faults, not carry load current. NEC starts at the service point. Continuous load equals 3 hours or more. If that feels automatic, you're building real mastery. Next episode, podcast episode 4. Article 100, Equipment, Locations, and Hazard Definitions. When you're ready, say, open quote, start podcast episode 4. Close quote. NEC 2023, Chapter 1 Mastery, Hashtasher Podcast Episode 4, Article 100, Equipment, Locations, and Hazard Definitions. Open quote, source, NFPA 70, National Electrical Code 2023 edition, Article 100. Why this episode is a big deal. Welcome to Episode 4. This episode covers equipment, locations, and hazard-related definitions, the words that quietly decide which rules apply later in the code. Close quote. Most NEC mistakes don't come from math. They come from misclassifying a location or piece of equipment. If you get these definitions right, chapters 3, 4, 5, and 6 suddenly become logical. Tag core idea for this episode. Every definition today answers one question. Open quote, what environment is this electrical equipment exposed to? Close quote, environment drives requirements. Definition group 1, locations. Extremely tested, dry location. A location not normally subject to dampness or wetness. Key phrase, not normally subject. Exam trap. A location can be dry even if moisture is occasionally present. Damp subject to moderate moisture. Examples, basements, barns, covered outdoor areas, roofed porches. Memory hook, open quote, damp equals moisture present but not dripping, close quote. Wet location, a location subject to saturation, dripping water, direct weather exposure. Examples, unprotected outdoor areas, underground, inside washing equipment. Exam gold, open quote, covered does not always mean dry, close quote. Snash definition group 2, enclosure. The case or housing designed to prevent accidental contact with live parts, environmental intrusion. Enclosure, raceway. Raceway's root conductors. Enclosures contain equipment. Cabinet, an enclosure designed to be mounted flush or surface. Commonly used for panel boards, cutouts, switches. Memory hook, open quote, cabinet's house electrical guts, close quote. Cutout box, an enclosure designed to contain overcurrent devices, fuse holders. Used mainly for services. Junction box, an enclosure used solely for splices, taps, conductor connections. Exam trap, open quote, junction boxes do not normally contain devices. Close quote. Definition group 3, raceways and support. RA-NL designed to hold conductors. Includes conduit, tubing, wireways, cable trays in some contexts. Important, cables are not raceways conduit. A specific type of raceway, usually metallic or non-metallic, rigid or flexible. The NEC treats conduit types very differently later. Definition group 4, equipment types. Luminaires, a complete lighting unit including lamp, ballast or driver housing. Fixture is informal. Luminaire is the NEC term. Outlet box, a box designed to house wiring devices, luminaires. Outlet box is a specific kind of box. Not all boxes qualify. Device, a unit that carries or controls electricity but is not a conductor. Examples, switches, receptacles, dimmers. Definition group 5, hazard and safety terms. Exposed, as applied to live parts, capable of being inadvertently touched. Exposed, accessible. A part can be exposed but not readily accessible. Guarded, covered, shielded, or protected to prevent contact. Memory hook, open quote, exposed plus guarded equals safer but still live, close quote. Energized, electrically connected to a source of voltage. Important, de-energized, safe, lockout, tagout still matters. Why these definitions control later chapters. These definitions determine wiring method S equipment ratings, Chapter 4, hazardous location rules, Chapter 5, special equipment rules, Chapter 6. Misclassify the environment and the entire installation fails. Episode 4, lock-in summary. Say this aloud. Dry does not mean moisture-free. Damp means moisture without saturation. Wet means saturation or direct exposure. Enclosures protect people and equipment. Junction boxes are for splices only. Luminaires are complete lighting units. Exposed does not mean safe. If that feels automatic, you're doing real NEC thinking. Next episode, Podcast Episode 5, Article 110, General Requirements, 110.110.7. When you're ready, say, open quote, start Podcast Episode 5, close quote. NEC 2023, Chapter 1 Mastery. Podcast Episode 5, Article 110, General Requirements 110.1.7. Open quote, source, NFPA 70, National Electrical Code 2023 edition. Article 110. Why Article 110 is everywhere. Welcome to Episode 5. Article 110 is the most cross-referenced article in the NEC. Inspectors cite it constantly because it governs how work is executed, not just what equipment you use. Close quote. If Article 100 defines the words, Article 110 defines the expectations. How to listen to this episode. Every section in 110 answers one question. Open quote. Is this installation done in a safe, professional, and verifiable way? Close quote. And 110.1, scope. Article 110 contains general requirements for electrical installations and applies unless modified by other articles. Memory hook, open quote, if nothing else says otherwise, 110 applies. Close quote. Hash 110.2, AIPment must be approved. Key points. Approval authority equals AHJ. Approval may involve listing, labeling, field evaluation. Exam insight. Open quote listed does not equal approved. Approval always comes from the AHJ. Close quote. Examination, identific ND use. Schnard 10.3a. Examination equipment must be examined for damage, suitability, unsafe conditions. If it's damaged out of the box, it cannot be installed. 110.3b. Installation and use equipment shall be installed and used in accordance with its listing and labeling. This is one of the most cited NEC rules ever. Exam gold. Open quote. If the manufacturer says torque to X, that torque is code required. Close quote. Schneider 110.4. Electrical connections. Electrical connectee collie secure, have good electrical continuity, not damage conductors. Includes terminals, pressure connectors, soldering, with restrictions. Key idea. Open quote. A loose connection is a code violation even if it works. Close quote. Strau 110.5 conductors. Conductors must be of suitable material properly in their rating. Exam trap. Mixing conductor materials incorrectly, like copper and aluminum without rated connectors, violates 110.5. Nodmatter 110.6, conductor sizes. Conductor sizes are based on American wire gauge, ABG for smaller sizes, circular mills for larger sizes. Memory hook. Open quote, AWG counts down as conductors get bigger, close quote. 110.7, wiring integrity. Wiring must not be damaged by installation methods, sharp edges lose protection against abrasion, deterioration. Inspector reality. Open quote, it works is irrelevant if insulation is compromised. Close quote. Why 110.1, 110.7 get people failed. These sections are subjective in appearance, objective in enforcement. They top unsafe work even when no specific rule is violated elsewhere. Episode 5, Lock-in Summary. Say this aloud. Article 110 applies unless modified. Equipment must be approved by the AHJ. Equipment must follow listing instructions. Loose or damaged connections are violations. Conductors must be suitable and protected. Working does not equal compliant. If that feels automatic, you're thinking like an inspector. Next episode. Podcast Episode 6. Article 110. Working space, access and protection. 110.26 and related rules. When you're ready, say, open quote, start podcast episode 6, close quote. NEC 2023, Chapter 1 Mastery. Podcast Episode 6, Article 110, Working Space, Access, and Protection. 110.26 and related rules. Open quote, source, NFPA 70, National Electrical Code, 2023 edition. Article 110, especially 110.26. Why? This episode fails inspections. Welcome to Episode 6. If Article 110.b is the most cited rule, 110.26 is the most failed rule. Close quote. This episode is about people's safety. Can a worker access the equipment? Can they stand safely in front of it? Can they work on it without injury? Inspectors enforce this aggressively because violations here kill people. Core idea 110.26 answers one question. Open quote. Can a qualified person safely operate and service this equipment? Close quote. If the answer is no, the installation fails, even if it works. Tashnashtar 110.26a, working space about electrical equipment. General rule. Working space must be provided around electrical equipment likely to require examination, adjustment, servicing, or maintenance while energized. This applies to panel boards, switchboards, motor controllers, disconnects. Memory hook. Open quote. If it might be worked hot, 110.26 applies. Close quote. Tashnashtat 110.26 AG space depth depends on voltage to ground and what's in front of you. 3 conditions. Condition 1, live parts on one side, grounded on the other. Condition 2, live parts on one side, live parts on the other. Condition 3, live parts on both sides. For systems 0 to 150 volts to ground, minimum depth 3 feet, condition 1. Exam reminder, open quote, voltage to ground, not phase to phase. Close quote. Tashnashtat 110.26 2, width of work the 30 inches, or width of the equipment, whichever is greater. Key rule, the workspace does not need to be centered. You can offset left or right, memory hook. Open quote, 30 inches minimum. Centered doesn't matter. Close quote. 110.26a3, height of working space. Minimum height 6.5 feet or height of equipment, whichever is greater. Measured from floor, platform, grade. Exam trap, open quote, drop ceilings do not reduce required height. Close quote. 110.26b, clear spaces. The working space must, used for storage. Inspector reality, open quote, a panel blocked by boxes is a violation, even temporarily, close quote. 1 on 10 by 26 C, entrance to working space. Large equipment rule, for E-amps or more and over 6 feet wide, a minimum of 2 entrances may be required. Purpose, escape in case of arc flash or failure. Memory hook, open quote, big gear equals multiple exits, close quote, close quote. 110.26D illumination, working spaces shall be illuminated. Key point, you cannot rely on portable lights, extension cords. Exam insight, open quote, permanent illumination is required, close quote. Dedicated equipment space, above equipment, the space above electrical equi-aided, free from foreign systems, ducts, piping, etc. Exceptions exist, but they are narrow. Memory hook, open quote, nothing unrelated above the panel, close quote. 110.27, guarding of live parts. Live parts must be guarded against accidental contact by enclosures, barriers. Important, guarding applies even if only qualified persons are present. Hashtag Y110.26 and 1 in 27 are exam gold. These rules are visual, are measurable, override convenience, override aesthetics. They also appear constantly in plan review, inspections, job site corrections. Episode 6 lock-in summary. Say this aloud. 110.26 applies to equipment likely worked energized. Depth depends on voltage to ground. Minimum width is 30 inches. Minimum height is 60 feet. Working space cannot be used for storage. Big equipment may require 2 exits. Panels need permanent lighting. Nothing unrelated above electrical equipment. Live parts must be guarded. If that feels automatic, you understand real-world NEC safety. Hashtag next episode, podcast, episode 7. Article 110, marking, interrupting ratings, and torque requirements. When you're ready, say open quote, start podcast, episode 7. Close quote. NEC 2023, Chapter 1, Mastery. Podcast Episode 7. Article 110. Marking, interrupting ratings, and torque requirements. Open quote. Source. NFPA 70, National Electrical Code 2023 edition. Article 110. Notably 1 in 10.9, 1.10, 1 in 10.16, 1 in 10.21, 1.24, 110.14. Close quote. Intro. Why this episode fails otherwise. Good work. Welcome to episode 7. This episode covers the rules that inspectors love because they are visible, measurable, documented. Everything today answers one question. Open quote, can this equipment safely handle the fault conditions it might see? And is that clearly communicated? Close quote, a clean install can still fail inspection if these rules aren't met. Dash core idea. Article 110 here is about fault energy, communication, and accountability. Star 110.9 interrupting rating. Rule equipment intended to interrupt current shall have an interrupting rating sufficient for the available fault current. This applies to circuit breakers, fuses, disconnects. Exam gold, open quote, the breaker must be able to safely stop the worst case fault, not just normal load current. Close quote, interrupting rating to ampere rating. Amp rating equals normal operation. Interrupting rating equals fault survival. Number 110.10, circuit impedance and fault current equipment must be installed so that fault currents are limited to values the equipment can safely handle. This ties together conductor impedance, overcurrent devices, available fault current. Memory hook, open quote, the system must survive its own worst failure. Close quote, 110.10 works with 110.9, not separately. Number 110.16, arc flash hazard warning. Requirement electrical equipment likely to require examination, adjustment, servicing, or maintenance while energized shall be marked with an arc flash warning label. Applies to panel boards, switchboards, industrial control panels. Exam insight, open quote. The NEC requires a warning, not a calculation or PPE level H analysis comes from other standards, like NFPA 70E, not the NEC. Close quote Tanner 110.21 marking. General rule. Markings must be legible, durable, suitable for the environment. If the marking fades, peels, or becomes unreadable, it's a violation. 110.21b. Field-applied hazard markings. Field-applied hazard markings must warn of hazards, use effective words, symbols, or colors. Memory hook, open quote. If the hazard exists, the warning must exist. Close quote. Not ever 110.24. Available fault current marking. Requirement service equipment shall be marked with the available fault current, the date it was calculated. This marking must be durable, visible, updated when conditions change. Exam staple. Open quote. This applies at the service equipment, not every panel. Close 110.14. S. Torque focus. Torque requirements. Where torque values are provided, terminals shall be torqued accordingly. Tools must be used. Good and tight is not code compliant. Inspector reality. Open quote. If it's marked, it's mandatory. Close quote. Why these rules are enforced. Prevent catastrophic failures. Reduce arc flash severity. Ensure future workers know the hazards. Create accountability after installation. They are documentation rules, not just physical ones. Episode 7. Lock-in summary. Say this aloud. Interrupting rating must exceed available fault current. Amp rating and interrupting rating are different. Systems must survive worst-case faults. Arc flash warnings are mandatory. Markings must be legible and durable. Service equipment must show available fault current. Torque values are not optional. If that feels automatic, you're thinking like both an installer and an inspector. Next episode podcast, episode 8, chapter 1, integration, recall drills, and exam traps. When you're ready, say, open quote, start podcast episode 8, close quote. NEC 2023, chapter 1 mastery. Podcast episode 8, chapter 1, integration, recall drills, and exam traps. Open quote, source, NFPA 70, National Electrical Code, 2023 edition. Chapter 1, Articles 90, 100, 110. Why this episode locks it in. Welcome to Episode 8, the Integration and Mastery episode. Close quote. Up to now, we've learned what the NEC is, Article 90, what the words mean, Article 100, how installations must be executed, Article 110. This episode connects everything and turns knowledge into recall, the difference between recognizing an answer and knowing it. Shash the Chapter 1 mental model. Open quote. Article 90 tells you how to read the code. Article 100 tells you what the words mean. Article 110 tells you how the work must be done. Close quote. If you remember nothing else, remember that. Shash how Chapter 1 overrides the entire NEC. Hierarchy Rule 90.3. Chapters 1 to 4 apply everywhere. Chapters 5 to 7 override 1 to 4 when applicable. Chapter 8 mostly stands alone. Chapter 9 tables are mandatory unless stated otherwise. Exam Translatio Chapter 1 rule. No later chapter saves you. Common chain reaction questions. Gold. Example logic chain. 1. Equipment installed incorrectly. 110.3b, violation 2. Working space blocked, 110.26 violation. 3. Marking missing, 110.21, 110.24 violation. 4. AHJ rejects 90.4 authority. 1 bad install can fail multiple sections at once. Rapid fire recall drills. Say these out loud. Article 90, drill. NEC purpose? Practical safeguarding of persons and property. Is NEC a design manual? No. Who enforces? AHJ. What beats general rules? Special rules. Article 100 drill. Readily A. No ladders, no obstacles. Grounded versus grounding. Condition versus action. Feeder versus branch circuit. Feeds panels versus feeds loads. Receptacle versus outlet. Device versus location. If you hesitate here, revisit episodes 2 to 4. Article 110 drill. Must equipment follow listing instructions? Yes. Can working space be used for storage? No. Are torque values optional? No. Must service equipment show available fault current? Yes. Top 10 Chapter 1 exam traps. 1. Confusing prove. Using common language instead of NEC definitions. 2. Forgetting NEC applies after the service point. 3. Mixing up neutral and EGC. 4. Measuring voltage phase to phase instead of to ground. 5. Assuming covered means dry. 6. Blocking panel working space temporarily. 7. Ignoring manufacturer torque instructions. 8. Missing arc flash warning requirements. 9. Forgetting AHJ authority overrides opinions. Every one of these comes directly from Chapter 1. Inspector vs. exam mindset. Exams test definitions, word precision, minimums. Inspectors enforce visibility, access, documentation, safety margins. Chapter 1 satisfies both. Final Chapter 1 lock-in, master statement. Say this slowly, open quote, the NEC exists to provide minimum safety. Words mean exactly what Article 100 says they mean. Installations must follow listing, spacing, marking, and fault rules. The AHJ has final authority. Close quote. If you can say that confidently, you understand Chapter 1. What you've now mastered. You can now interpret NEC language correctly, classify systems and conductors, recognize universal installation violations, answer Chapter 1 exam questions quickly, defend answers with code logic. This is the hardest conceptual chapter. Everything else builds on it. Next step options. You choose. When you're ready, we can start Chapter 2. Wiring and protection. Do Chapter 1 exam simulations. Create audio-only definition drills. Build IBEW-style timed quizzes. Convert these into script-ready podcast files. Just tell me what you want next.